The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Wednesday, the 27th of January, 2016, opened up with gold at $1,120 an ounce, silver $14.48 an ounce, Texas crude $31.45 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently sitting at about $395 U.S. currency. Today in history, Thursday, January 27th, 1825, the U.S. Congress approves Indian Territory in what is present-day Oklahoma. This cleared the way for the forced relocation of Eastern Indians, known as the Trail of Tears. In recent news, the Vatican announced over the weekend that Pope Francis will be visiting Sweden later this year to mark the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther's writing and posting of the 95 Theses on the front doors of All Saints Church in Wittenberg, Germany, October 31st, 1517. Amongst other points, Luther primarily wrote argumentations against the Roman Catholic theology of indulgences, essentially the selling of forgiveness from temporal punishment from sins for money, a practice still upheld by the Church. On October 31st of this year, Francis is set to be at the southern Swedish city of Lund, where the Lutheran World Federation was founded in 1947. While his predecessors have visited Protestant churches, Francis has come under criticism from traditionalists and conservatives within the Church, who accuse him of sending conflicting signals about interfaith relations. Catholic traditionalists have accused Francis of making too many concessions to Lutherans, since both religions will be using Luther's Common Prayer during the 2017 Reformation commemoration services being held jointly between the two churches, which they say excessively praise Luther, who was historically condemned as a heretic and excommunicated. Pope Francis made ecumenism one of the main themes of his papacy, considering he has already visited the Lutheran Church of Rome, the Waldensian Protestant community in northern Italy, Rome's Jewish synagogue, and is soon due to become the first pope to visit Rome's mosque later this year. Marvin Minsky, a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, died Sunday at the age of 88. Minsky viewed the brain as a machine whose function can be studied and replicated in a computer, and he considered how machines might be endowed with common sense, or artificial intelligence. Daniela Rust, director of MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, said that Minsky helped create the vision of artificial intelligence as we know it today. This was your lowdown for January 27, 2016.
All right, good friends, good evening and welcome here on this, the already 28th, coming down the home stretch end of January, 28th of January, Thursday, January 28th, 2016. It's time for INN World Report Radio here on the Great Logos Radio Network. And good evening. Thank you for tuning in. We have a nice show lined up for you tonight. For the first time this year, we will be joined by Scott Creighton over at American Everyman, a great blog, very perceptive guy, and he's got a lot to say. I have not spoken with Scott in a bit, so it'll be good to be catching up with him. And I also see that our good friend Garrod O'Coleman in Paris is online too. So I just sent out a little chat with him. He may join us as well. He's been writing some incredible articles lately as well, going back to the Paris attacks and some other things too. There's a lot of talk going on right now about the population bomb, the immigration bomb that's being dropped on Europe. And there's a lot to say about that. And, some people are calling it a form of warfare, actually, breaking down European society even further. I'm sure we'll get into that with Scott Creighton as well. The European Parliament, or the government now that's running Europe is showing to be itself more and more tyrannical. The latest I'm seeing now is they're trying to push for Greece to build a camp in or near Athens to hold 300,000 people. How crazy is that? We had this whole discussion here about FEMA camps. They want to have the Greeks, it's really funny. The Europeans have been trashing the Greeks all over the place, yet they're making all kinds of demands of them, demanding they let all these refugees from the oligarchy's war in Syria into Europe through Greece and so forth. So anyhow, we could talk about that too. Phone lines are open, 512-646-1984. Is it tonight, the latest Republican debate? And there's been a brouhaha about that because Republican frontrunner Donald Trump is refusing to participate in the debate. And I can't say that I blame him, so-called debate. I don't think any of these things are really debates. Because, the establishment, not just on the Republican side, apparently, even on the Democratic side, everyone seems to be gunning for this Trump candidacy. People in the mainstream are gunning for him, and especially the really conservatives at the place like the National Review. A whole bunch of them put out a whole ad against him, a whole article against him, and they're doing everything they can to keep him from succeeding. And that goes down even to some of the commentators on Fox, I believe, who've given him a hard time. So he just decided, you know what, Fox is running this thing. I'm not going to be part of it. So what do you think? 512-646-1984. And he singled out one of their commentator women, Megyn Kelly, her name is, who, I've watched this woman, and I'm not all that impressed. I mean, I'm impressed with somebody who's a newsreader and who knows how to do talking points and all. But all these people on the news don't know what they're talking about. For instance, they talk about ISIS as if it's real, and somehow we never saw it moving around for the last 2 years, so we didn't do anything about it. I mean, it's silly. So we could talk about that too. What do you think about the Donald Trump candidacy? Has the elites freaking out? Either he truly is not under their control, or if he is, they want you to think he's not, and so they're just faking being freaked out. I don't know. What do you think? 512-646-1984. You can get right in. And we could talk about that. I sent out my snowstorm video, the first real video I've ever made. I'm learning video editing, and I put together about a 6.5-minute video. I sent it out. I've gotten many nice comments from you all. Thank you so much. One of my dogs, Charlie, is featured in the video, and he's running around the snow with me. He was helping me shovel and stuff. And also, people seem to like the music that I picked out as the background. There's no talking, right? There's just one song. And I liked it, and I thought it went well with the snowstorm, and apparently people have responded, liked it as well. And I've gotten some really nice emails, feedback, and I hope maybe one of y'all could, give me some feedback on it. It's real easy to do, info@innradio.com if you got a copy of the video. If you haven't, you'd like to see it, send me an email. I'll be happy to send you a copy. I put it up on a web server that I have associated with this INN Radio, so I can send you the link. info@innradio.com is how you can always get through to me. I monitor the email all day long. And like that. So, a lot's going on. A lot is changing. And it's particularly interesting because it is all sort of, everything's being compressed, I feel, right now. The oligarchy that what I refer to as the financial oligarchs, Anglo-American, European, Zionist, they went crazy after the collapse of the Soviet Union, celebrating a unipolar world. They wanted to make sure it stayed that way, which is really silly. And why, by the way, is it necessary for there to be a unipolar world? If you're a nice person and you can get along with others, why do you need to be living in a neighborhood where you're the only one in charge? You can't work well with others? And I think it speaks to the fact that they just want to run everybody else's business as well. So they wanted to make it a unipolar world. And the Project for the New American Century, which is starting off really poorly, by the way, if that's the case, dedicated to never allowing another power to rise in the world that was as strong, say, as the Soviet Union. And this is just a disastrous, ridiculous idea. To begin with, competition is what makes everything and everybody better, right? Isn't that what the free market and all that's supposed to be about? Well, when there is competition, economic competition, serious economic competition, I don't mean just everyone playing on the same field, just different teams. I mean different fields. The American people have made out the best. When Soviet communism was in the world, to keep American capitalism and European capitalism under control, the American middle class came to be because the people running our world did not want us to go communist. It was in the Depression, and they were screwing us really bad. And they just had bad timing on that Depression thing, because in Russia they had a Russian Revolution. They took off the heads of the previous leadership and their aristocracy and all, and they were trying to do something different. And there was no Depression in Russia when everybody else in Europe and America were flat on their backs. And they were building like crazy because they had a whole new system that didn't depend on the very wealthy, creaming off the lion's share. To that point, by the way, you've heard me say many times here that the Oxfam, the group from England that monitors wealth and things like that, famously a couple of years ago came out with a report that 87 families were in control of 1/2 of the world's wealth. Well, they've come out with their update on that report. Now it's down to 62 people are in control of half of the world's wealth. Now, I got news for you, friends. If you think that all happened on the up and up, if you think that happened because somebody invented a better light bulb and sold a whole bunch of them and, deserved to be rich, I got a bridge I can sell you right here in Brooklyn. It's, only about 100 and something years old, but it's still very sturdy. Give you a great price on it. Especially fortunes that go way, way back. There was the British aristocracy made a lot of money on opium. In fact, the Chinese didn't like it. They fought 2 wars over it, the Opium Wars. And, this kind of great ancient wealth goes all the way back to stuff like that. And when, by the way, did they ever stop peddling dope? When was the day that the British Crown stopped dealing in dope, by the way? Because, we're in Afghanistan, and it's the major source, I believe, of the opium poppy. And as far as I know, that crop is still going strong. We're in charge. I think we've got our soldiers protecting these poppy fields. Now, they want to be in your bank account. They want to know every little thing you did. They busted former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer by monitoring his bank account because he took $10,000 out to go play with hookers or something like that. They found that, and they exposed it, and he was hounded out of office over it. But yet, there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion or more dollars, sloshing around in the banks just to pay for the opium coming out of Afghanistan. And nobody dealing in that seems to get arrested or busted. Did you ever notice that? Because it's a bifurcated system. Like Leona Helmsley famously said, it's not we who pay the taxes, it's the little people who pay the taxes. And so too with the rules and the laws and so forth. Written laws are like spider's webs. It is true they will catch the weak and the small, but would be torn to pieces by the rich and the powerful. Laws are not for everybody. They're just for some people, right? What if you went into a McDonald's and killed everybody, and then when they captured you, they said, "What the hell did you do?" And you said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they had weapons of mass destruction in here, and they were going to come and kill my family with them." Well, of course, there would be no weapons of mass destruction found in the McDonald's. It'd just be a bunch of dead people laying around. And are they supposed to pat you on the back and say, "Oh, okay, fine, no problem. We understand what you did and why you did it." So is that what's supposed to happen? Is that an excuse because you thought? That's what we've got. Well, nothing happened to the people who promulgated that lie because it's not the same system they live under than the one that we do. What's the difference? You tell me. Call 512-646-1984. What's the difference between going into a McDonald's with an AR-15, killing everybody because you erroneously thought that they had weapons of mass destruction in there and they were going to come out and kill you and your family, and what we did in Iraq? You tell me there's one system of laws for everybody in this country. I don't think so. Sure don't look that way to me. And, what's the hallmark of tyranny? No accountability. Right? Lack of accountability. We don't have any accountability. That's why Donald Trump is so popular. He's screaming for accountability. He said we got a bunch of losers running the show. Well, that's putting it kindly. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Right back with you just after this. Scott Creighton coming later in the show.
Now, you are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Baby ambassador to England or France, may like to gamble, might like to dance, maybe the heavyweight champion of the world, but you got to serve somebody. Hey, you gotta serve somebody. Maybe the devil educated, maybe a businessman, some high-degree thief. May call your doctor, may call your chief. You got to serve somebody. Oh, serve somebody. Might be the devil or the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. Maybe a state trooper, maybe a young Turk, maybe the head of some big TV network, maybe rich or poor, maybe blind or lame. He living in another country under another name, but you gotta serve somebody. Oh, serve somebody. Might be the devil.
All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley here, INN World Report Radio, Tuesday nights and Thursday nights. Now, Scott Creighton will be joining us in about 15 minutes from American Everyman, great blog. What is it? WillieLoman.wordpress.com. And I know he's got a lot to say. He's been following that whole situation out in Oregon, and we'll be talking with him about that, I'm sure. I'd like to talk with him about the Trump thing. And also, listen, very exciting. Somebody who I have listened to for years, although I can't say I've listened to him in the last few years, but he used to be on the radio here in New York. He was a morning drive and afternoon drive host throughout the Clinton years. I used to listen to him. Very, very articulate, very funny, actually, very smart, very insightful. He's a trial lawyer, so he knew an awful lot about the law. I learned a lot about the law from listening to him, and he'll be on the show with us a week from tonight. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm talking about Lionel, the radio host. I think his name is James LeBron, but he goes by the name of Lionel, and he's extremely insightful, very funny, very articulate. I think he even does stand-up comedy, but he really he's not into this political correctness at all. I believe he's a Second Amendment person. And so we're going to have Lionel on the show. Now, I've actually been inspired, I would say, partially by Lionel, although others. And so I'm kind of really excited about that. I went back and forth with him, I think it was yesterday on email, and he was down with it. He wants to come meet you all. I told him about you, the great INN World Report listening audience. And he's a great, he won an Emmy award for his investigative, I think, radio journalism last year. So this is no slouch. And so if you are familiar with Lionel and you're a fan of his, well, he'll be here on the show next week. That's very exciting. So there you have it. Now, meanwhile, let's go right back to phone lines open, 512-646-1984. If you would like to call in, that would be great. You can email me as well. I sent out my video after Tuesday night's show for the snowstorm here in New York. If you'd like to see what that looks like, send me an email, and I'll be happy to send that out to you, about 6.5 minutes or so. My first video, all done, by the way, with handheld with my cell phone. That's it. And I cannot believe the quality for, a small little cell phone. They're really, they determined that the quality of these cameras, both motion and still, is going to be a big sales point, selling point for these things. And, they really have put a lot of technology into it. So I'm quite surprised with the quality of it. And, of course, what I put up on my server, which you can see isn't even the highest quality version, although it looks fine. You don't want to put a file up there that's so high quality it takes too long to download. So that's a little something right there. But anyway, back to this situation. Greece, we've got a friend in Greece who emails us several times a day, and things are really, really bad for those people. I don't know, friends. Where did we? I can understand greedy bastards taking as much as they can get. I can understand greedy bastards lying about what's happening as they take as much as they can get. We're having really bad problems. The housing market, the housing bubble, all that nonsense, right? But yet they're making out fine. So think about what we're supposed to accept here. We're supposed to accept that we have the best system that there is. You don't have to think about improving it or making another one, because there's nothing better. This is God's preferred system, this capitalist so-called free market system that we have. However, it has problems, and it causes big depressions sometimes and ruins a lot of people sometimes. But not to worry, because there's nothing to replace it with, because it's the best. It's just the best. But it has these big problems sometimes. And many of you, if you get caught in one of these problems, if you live and die between them, you'll be all right. But if you are born before one and you get caught in one, you can really get crushed. And but that's it. However, by the way, it just so happens by accident, somehow, with this crazy system of ours, which is the best, which makes all of us suffer so much every few generations, whatever you want to call it. It just so happens that for a handful of people at the top, when all the rest of us are suffering, they are making out better than anybody else has ever made out in history. It's an accident. I don't know. It just happens, but and we have to accept it. And there's no questioning. There's no analysis. There's no accountability. What became of us, friends? Since when do we become armless, legless victims that just say, okay, hit me with another one? That Occupy Wall Street was a glimmer of hope. I was down there, Zuccotti Park, right here in Lower Manhattan, right near where I used to work, right diagonally across, east diagonally across from the World Trade Center. I used to go to Zuccotti Park sometimes at lunch. It used to be at lunchtime. It's a whole city block in Manhattan, which is a big rectangle. Was it Broadway on the east side, Church Street on the west side, Liberty Street, I think, on probably the south side, and Cedar Street, I think, on the north side. It's a big park. It's still there. Got trees in it and stuff. Not too big. You can see through. Of course, all the trees, I think, got screwed during 9/11. But it used to be ringed with food trucks. And, man, you can get all kinds of great food there. I'm sure they probably came back since then. But I used to go there for lunch. And even the Hare Krishna people had a food truck there. You can get all you could eat for like $5-6. Vegetarian food, really good. But that's where Occupy Wall Street was held. And it looked like there was a glimmer of hope. It looked like people were starting to get up off their butts and starting to do something. But that didn't really turn into much. So what happened? I can tell you one thing what happened. They got us busy fighting with each other, red state, blue state, conservative, liberal, gun owner, gun taker, all of these little stupid issues, wedge issues. I don't mean to say that they're all stupid issues, but there are much bigger issues to worry about, which is while they've got us busy fighting with each other, we're being slowly walled in, brick by brick, penned in, physically as well as ethically and intellectually and data-wise in a big prison. And, when are the American people going to wake up? When, they're trying it all around the world. They're trying it all around the world. In Greece with Syriza, and it's not just here. They're screwing the Europeans really bad. Oh, my goodness. Really, really bad. And now with this stupid refugee stuff, this is a totally unnecessary war that we've created. Totally unnecessary war that we've created. And they're pushing the refugees. First of all, these poor people have had their homes bombed. That's why they're leaving. They should not be in the street in the first place. Number one. Number two, if they are, they should be right next door in Turkey in the same culture, very close to home, so they could go right back, get this damn war done with. But no, they're pushing them into Europe. And over here, too. And we're just supposed to take it. This is like an invading army into Europe. Hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe 1 million soon. I don't know. Listen, Scott Creighton will be with us on the other side of the break. Tom Kiley taking a break. We'll be right.
If you were hiding from the law, would you answer an ad promising a free TV to anyone who tested home electronic equipment? Some Chicago crooks did, and police gave them quite a prize. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back with details after this.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Con artists love scamming people with bogus offers, but in Chicago, police turned the tables and reeled in dozens of arrests. Police mailed invitations to the last known addresses of 10,000 violent felons, drug dealers, and burglars, offering $75 and a free plasma TV to anyone who came down to a warehouse to test out TVs and video games. Inside the warehouse, decorated with party balloons and posters, officers in bright T-shirts had those gullible fugitives pose for pictures before arresting them. 102 in all. I'd say even Paul Newman would have gotten a chuckle out of that sting. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
Looking for some truth? You found it. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
right, good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio, finishing up January here. I guess this will be our last show of January 2016. But for the first time this year on INN World Report Radio, and I dare say it won't be the last, we're rejoined now by Scott Creighton with his the power behind the excellent blog American Everyman, which you can get to by going to willieloman.wordpress.com. Scott, Happy New Year belatedly, and welcome back to INN.
Well, Happy New Year, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Scott. And you do such great work. You work so hard. I don't always agree with you. I don't always agree with everybody, but I really do enjoy your point of view, even if I don't happen to agree with it on a particular subject. And you really give me good food for thought on a lot of other ones as well. Since we talked last, we've got, I don't know, were we already talking with this stupid refugee onslaught?
Jeez, I think we did. I think we touched on a bit. I've been covering this since it really started off, and I think we did touch on it last time.
Well, my opinion is that the powers that be, which, I don't know, for lack of a better term, the Anglo-American Zion oligarchs, want to punish the Europeans for foot-dragging and not getting more behind the war on Syria. So as a strategy, they've given their buddy Erdogan the green light to open up the gates and start pushing the refugees into El Norte, there into Europe. So the Europeans will feel pain and decide, you know what, the best thing to do is let's go into this war in Syria, wipe out Assad, and push all these people back where they came from. That's my theory. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a good theory. Have you read Kelly Greenhill's work on that, Weapons of Mass Migration Campaigns?
Not particularly that one, but I've, first of all...
You can find a link to it on my site, and right. She wrote it about, I think it was 2011, maybe 2010, in that ballpark.
Yeah.
And it basically talks about exactly what you're saying, using mass migration as a weapon of regime change. And it works on many different levels. First of all, you can get all kinds of funding. The first thing George Soros was talking about, I don't know, 9 months ago, 7 months ago, when this whole thing really kicked off, and he had that stage scene with the kid on the beach, and they took a photograph over here, took a photograph over here. What did they pick up the kid's body and move it up? No. Soros
well, actually, Scott, can I ask you to hold on 1 second, please?
Yeah.
I just got an announcement here. Deb, are you there? Deborah? Because one of our friends, Gerardo Coleman, who is in Paris, is online right now, and I thought I'd ask him, to come on for a minute. He could talk about this as well, but I haven't caught him. I want to say happy. Do you mind if he joins us for a couple of minutes?
Absolutely not. Go
very good. Deb, are you there? Hello, Deb? Deborah? Let's hello, Deb. Oh, wow. I'm trying to get Gerardo to join. I don't want to try to do it myself because I know I'm going to screw everything all up. Let's see.
Can you Skype her a message when she comes back? She'll read it.
Yeah, I guess she's not there. So let me just do that. And anyhow, keep talking. I'll back to yes, weapons of mass migration.
Right. Basically, it's a plan that she wrote out for. I think it was the Defense University or one of these institutions. Basically, talking about how they're going to use weapons mass migration campaigns to undermine certain governments that they want undermined, to force regime change on others, all sorts of good things that they could do with it. Another thing that they write about in there is they can also destabilize economies, forcing down wage structures, improving gross domestic product by improving profit margins. Well, it's funny. Just the other day, the IMF suggested they put out a study, and it was released at the Davos convention, I believe.
The hobnobbing of the rich and famous there.
Right. And they were talking about what they want people to do what they want governments to do is to be forced to take these refugees in, certain amount, as we know they were pushing for, 500,000 a year for every European Union nation, something ungodly like that. But they want to be able to say they have no constitutional protections. They aren't going to have to be paid a minimum wage. They can be paid below minimum wage, whatever the minimum wage is in whatever country they go to. And they're pushing for, in Germany and I think in Sweden, Denmark. Denmark just passed some kind of legislation allowing them to do this. I know they've been doing it in Germany. Confiscating their wealth when they come in over and above a certain amount. So let's say a family of refugees has been saving up to move from wherever. And it's not just Syria, but wherever they come from. And they've sold all this stuff. They've got a few family heirlooms. They get on the boat. They come over. They get into wherever they're going. They go to Germany. They get into Germany. They literally in Germany have police officers, some kind of law enforcement, or even soldiers. The first thing these people see when they come in, going through their possessions and taking their valuables and taking their money, so that they're impoverished, so that they're desperate, so that they have to accept whatever kind of wages that they're offered. To me, that's just amazing.
Well, also, I guess it would prevent the rich people from coming. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, when's the last time that you saw people getting off of a cattle car in Germany and having their gold confiscated and the money confiscated? I mean, it really is kind of a touchy subject, especially when you think of the history of Germany. It's probably not a good PR move of theirs, but they're doing it. I mean, it's the refugee situation is not an accident. It didn't just happen by happenstance. Obviously, as you know, we've been destabilizing a lot of the countries that they come from, but also many of them, I think like 60%, or some recent study came out, says like 60% aren't even from these countries. They're actually economic refugees from places we've installed this neoliberal free market economy.
Well, it's also, it's more than just forcing the Europeans, I think, to get into the act in Syria. You're right. I think it's also a way to, just like immigration does, mass immigration of low-wage workers does anywhere, drag the countries down. The further breaking up of culture in Europe as well. I think that's another aspect of all of this, which I think is just sort of makes it a twofer, you know.
And what you were talking about before, as far as divide and conquer, you've got people on both sides. You've got people saying, "Oh, you got to be a human. These are all little girls and little kids, and we got to bring them in." And you got people saying they're all ISIS members, ready to kill you and rape you, and so you have that divide and conquer aspect of it too, and that's all covered in Kelly Greenhill's work.
Well, also, it's not particularly humanitarian to say we got to let these people in without ignoring the fact that why are they there in the first place? If you are a humanitarian, then you get on your government and you say stop these wars, you know.
Right.
But the pro-war left can't do that.
Or you say stop this kind of economic intrusion into their countries, like we did in Mexico, which is why we have so many people coming up from Mexico, because they don't want to work for 38 cents an hour. You know, just because they live 2 miles on the other side of the border.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's coming to a head. I just saw an article where they're trying to push Greece now to build a concentration camp like for 300,000 people right outside of Athens. Did you see that story?
I did see that story. I picked up on that story as well. And this is what I wrote the other day about this. This is what they're going to be doing. They really want these people to come in to be economically desperate. They want to build these concentration camps, these work camps, and I guarantee you they're going to build these things right next. I wrote this the other day when I was writing about this. I guarantee you they're going to be building these things right next to free trade zones, right next to industrial centers, so they can be put in these camps, and then they can be working. You just open the gate in the morning. They walk in there. They work for almost next to nothing because they're basically slaves, and at night they go back to their camp.
Yeah, I mean, they've done this before in Europe.
They did this before, you know, and that was Nazi Germany, and they had these things all over Europe. And here we are. Here's the IMF saying this is exactly what we got to do. And now I think you sent an email out saying they're talking about building some kind of concentration camp in Greece right now.
Yeah. That's the one I'm talking about in Athens. 300,000 people.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the only difference is instead of stormtroopers in black, it's everybody's got an iPhone to play with, so they don't notice it.
Right.
Everybody's playing around on Facebook, telling everybody what they had for dinner yesterday.
Well, you know, you have to, but let's go back and be honest about this. Mm-hmm. People were doing the same thing here in the United States while this was going on in Europe. It didn't all of a sudden just pop up, and they didn't just happen to follow the tanks. This was going on in Europe for years before we wanted to get involved.
What do you mean, the refugees from the Middle East?
No. We're talking about, go back to Nazi Germany.
Sure. That was done with U.S. money. IBM gave them the computers to keep track of them. All right, we'll be right back, friends, just after this.
Easy.
All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio here on the Great Logos Radio Network, Tuesdays and Thursday nights. And as they said in Alice in Wonderland, it just keeps getting curiouser and curiouser. We've got a target of opportunity. Our good friend Gerodo Coleman, who we have not spoken with in some time, an Irish journalist who lives in Paris and has written from there extensively. He's on Russia Today these days, and was, I thought, giving some great coverage of the recent Paris attacks. Now he's also writing about the weapons of mass migration that we were just talking to. He's on the line joining us with Scott Creighton. Gerodo, are you there?
Yes, indeed. Hi, Tom. Nice to be here again.
It's been a long time, Gerodo. I mean, I think you had some issues with your computer and stuff. I hope that's getting straightened out, but we miss having you on the show, brother.
Yeah, I miss talking to you. I mean, we had some great conversations there. It's almost been a couple of years now, I guess.
It's been a while. Well, we started about a couple of years ago, yes. And also, friends, this gentleman owes me a pub crawl in Dublin, which I am definitely going to take him up on.
Cork.
Cork, even better. One of these days. And I'll do it on the air again. Gearoid, you're on with our good friend Scott Creighton, who I think the two of you would really appreciate each other's work, and I'm going to connect you two via email as well.
Super. Hi, Scott.
Hi, how you doing, Gearoid?
Gearoid, how much?
I take it I'm invited to the pub crawl as well, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'll let you know when I'm going to go. And
that's a good way to get to know somebody.
Oh, yeah. And then, you know what?
It's the Irish way, yeah.
We'll come to Tampa, Florida. Gearoid and I will have a pub crawl there, too, or maybe a pub swim. But anyway, Gearoid, we were just talking, Scott and I, about this, weapons of mass migration into Europe. I see that you've written on that recently. You're over there. I don't see a great deal of talk about France being involved in this. Obviously, Greece, Germany, Merkel's getting heat for it now, the Eastern European countries. I don't see much talk in France. What's it like from the European perspective in Central Europe there in France? Or Western Europe, I should say.
The first thing I suppose to say is that the migration policy in the different member states of the European Union is different. So they don't all have the same policy. The Germans have been the most open to immigration. The French don't have a population deficit like Germany. Germany has a huge population deficit. Ethnic Germans, if we can use that description, are dying out. They're having an average of like one child per family. France and Ireland are the two probably most demographically healthy populations in Europe. In Western Europe, and in any case. Of course, Eastern Europe has huge population deficit problems as well. Bulgaria has a population that's dying. Romania has had major problems for years. In fact, during the Ceausescu era, they tried to resolve that problem with disastrous results.
They put AK-47s to each married family and say, produce?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really researched that era. My only knowledge of that era has come from the television, so I can't really say exactly what happened in Romania, but I do know that they had a population problem, and their attempt to resolve it didn't work. East Germany didn't have a population problem, by the way. They had a very good family policy, so it was easy to work and for women to work and have babies as well. There was none of this silly version of feminism that exists in the West, which is basically sort of anti-man feminism. It didn't exist in the Eastern countries. It was much more balanced. But
I think that's an important point, Gearoid, that a country's policies does affect families and children and growth and that sort of thing. And it's a sort of an anomaly here in the States. They think that anything socialist or communist is anti-person, anti-family and everything, when actually you're right. I lived in West Berlin, right across the border from East Berlin. And, it would make total sense to me that with the support that they had for women and families, that they would have had a healthier population growth there.
Yeah, they did. And the thing is, the Germany's population deficit is due to neoliberal capitalism. It's due to the fact that they don't have a welfare state anymore. Those parents need to work to make a living. That's the case everywhere in Europe, of course. And that's destroying family life. Their families don't exist anymore. Most kids are in childcare. Families who are doing well are busy making money. And families who are not doing well are busy working all the time. So everybody's working, really. Nobody's any time to do anything. So that's one cultural problem. Another aspect to the migration crisis is the population explosion in the southern hemisphere of the world, particularly the Middle East and Africa. In spite of the oppression in the Middle East and in spite of poverty, and there's a huge population explosion. So there's an average of, I think, from the research I've read in German by German sociologist Gunnar Heimson, something like 5 to 6 kids per family in a lot of Palestinian families, for example, in the Middle East.
Because they have nothing else to do.
Syria.
Like Richard Pryor said, you done took everything else from them.
That's right. They got nothing else to do. What else are they going to do?
Yeah, I suppose there are lots of issues driving it. But in Syria, they also had population explosion. There's a very good book by a German sociologist I just mentioned, Gunnar Heimson. He predicted, I think in 2006, that in 10 years, I think it was in 2003 actually. He said in 10 years there's going to be a massive population boom. In other words, the babies being born at that time would reach, or the toddlers at that time would be teenagers. And, they would be, once they get to the kind of age of 17 and 18, there would be no work for them in Tunisia, in Algeria, in all the North African countries, and right throughout the African continent. And he shows in his studies that generally, historically, in traditional families, let's say if you've got a grocer or a shop owner, the eldest son will get the business. The second son, he kind of has to find his own way. You know, if you're a farmer, the eldest son gets the first son gets the farm. You know, there's been a kind of tradition of, you know, the second and third sons usually have to go away and find their own way. And in these states, all of these states in Africa have been built on neoliberal policies imposed in the 1970s and 80s in particular, where every attempt to build a viable state in Africa was sabotaged by coup d'etats, military intervention, all sorts of imperialist destabilization policies that reduced they destroyed the state structures in these countries, hampered their development, imposed underdevelopment on them, and client rulers, client dictators.
Vassals.
So yes, exactly, and so that you had a population explosion, and that these youngsters of, let's say, from the average age of 18 to 30 or whatever, would then start traveling, and the obvious place to go would be Europe. So that's another aspect to it. So the population deficit from advanced industrial capitalism in Germany, and the population deficit in Eastern Europe is due to the absolute poverty after the fall of the Eastern Bloc regimes, because of once the Eastern Bloc regimes were gone, there was no social hope. Everything collapsed, and there was massive immigration. So you have social decline all over Eastern Europe. Then you have this population explosion in the southern countries. So U.S. policy analysts, U.S. military strategists, people like, I cited Thomas Barnett, for example. People like Thomas Barnett understood this a long time ago, and they understood the opportunity that this presented for U.S. geopolitical strategy in Europe, which has always been to divide the European peninsula from the Eurasian landmass. And so the U.S. has always understood that if it's to actually conquer the world, if you look at it on the map, is essentially the Eurasian landmass plus Africa, and that's an island, actually. It's only separated by the canal, the Suez Canal. So if you look at that as an island, then the way in which you rule that island is to divide it. And the center, according to traditional geopolitics, Halford Mackinder, the father, I suppose, of geopolitics, the center is Russia. That's where and Central Asia, that's where all the resources are. And so a key strategic point is Eastern Europe, which is why the United States is militarizing Poland, which is why they've got missiles and nuclear missiles aimed at Russia. There's militarization of all those countries from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. And then, of course, you have a destabilization of Syria, which is in the Eastern Mediterranean. So they're trying to build a big kind of a cordon sanitaire in this region to block the European peninsula from the main continent, which is the Eurasian landmass. Germany needs to integrate with Eurasia. It needs to integrate with Russia and China if it's to have a future.
And that's the source of a lot of tension right now with the train that they want to build from China all the way to Madrid, right? And the Germans like that idea, but there's a big competition. Before you go further, Scott, you too were talking before Garrod joined us about this same thing. I don't know the woman that you spoke of who wrote an article about this as well, that the Pentagon was aware of this migration problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Kelly Greenhill's work got into the surplus population explosion and how it could be managed and manipulated. But basically, her study wasn't an article. It was a study done for the Department of Defense. But her study basically lays out how you use the mass migration campaigns to destabilize countries and targeted nations and to undermine things like wage structures, create civil discord between the left and the right. But basically, she was talking about it specifically on an individual, nation by nation, targeted country by targeted country basis. Right. This is how we do it. This is how we use it. This is why we'll send them in there. I think it's interesting that Garrod, did I pronounce that right?
Garrod.
Yeah.
Garrod.
I think it's interesting that he was talking about. If you look back at the yes, Europe does have all the different countries still do have, even though they're in the European Union, they all have different laws.
Hold on one second there, Scott. I'm sorry. We're down to the wire. We'll be right back, friends, with Garrod and with Scott right after this. good friend, friend's unexpected pleasure. Our good friend Garoda Coleman happens to be online. He's up late. He's in Paris. Although you wouldn't know it if you listen to his voice, he's originally from Ireland, and he's joined us. That would be Scott Creighton and myself. Scott Creighton, of course, the force behind the blog American Everyman, which you can get to by going to willieloman.wordpress.com. Gerard, where's the best place for people to see your writings these days?
Well, there's a website under construction, finally. So it's www.garodacoleman.com. That's GearoidOColmain.com. So that's our, there's a kind of a Facebook page with all the videos that are going up there as well. And there's a YouTube video channel. So I've got a team working with me now. So there's a lot of stuff kind of archived that's going out that basically hasn't been put online yet. But so the new website should be finished in about a week because we're doing a lot of stuff on it. So it's going to be very active this year. We're really.
So why don't we have you back on when the launch happens too, so we can celebrate that? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll open a bottle of champagne for that.
Oh, there you go. And then you and Scott and I will have to rendezvous in Cork for a pub crawl.
Yeah, sure. We definitely do that someday when I get back to Cork. We
can also meet in Scott's
Cork is the best pub city in the world, really. So
okay.
There's, I didn't mention I am getting money from the Irish brewery business to say that, but I do have to take money.
And who knows? Maybe we could go from there to Scott's neck of the woods in Tampa.
Product placement there, huh?
Yeah.
We also discovered at the break that we're cousins.
Oh, quite possibly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through maternally or something like that.
I am also a Coleman. My grandmother and my grandmother's family are Colemans.
And both of them have lots of free lanterns that they can give away too. So, all right. So, guys, we were talking about the migration. We can
Let me finish this.
Yeah.
He was talking about the integration of immigration policy through all the different nations in the EU. And I just wanted to toss out there that that was one of the things I was talking about earlier. George Soros, 6 months ago, when this whole thing really kicked off, George Soros going out there saying we need more money, we need to force people to take X amount of refugees per nation. The other big thing he was pushing for was to consolidate all the different immigration laws from the different countries and get them all under the same rubric, under the same make them all the same. So that was a big thing. I don't know how that's been advancing over there. Maybe Gerard can fill us in on that.
On what? On the George?
On the different immigration laws in Europe.
Trying to integrate all the laws into one standard immigration law for all European Union countries, as opposed to all these different laws.
Yeah, the thing is that the laws, as I say, they're obviously not standardized. There isn't, there's no coherence in kind of the European Union really because it's an artificial union. They're trying to centralize it. The Dublin Accords were the main kind of accord. Schengen, for example, free movement of people. This is likely. There's rumors now that Schengen is going to be abandoned. So it's basically going to stop because you've got basically a lot of states are panicking. It's hard to know who's doing what in the sense that there are reports. There was a report came out recently in German press. It was an interview with a police officer who basically said that the German foreign minister was lying about immigration, about the fact that he was claiming that it was all under control. They were all being registered, and he said, "No, it's complete nonsense." There are thousands.
And the Germans like to register things and people.
Yeah,
they like to have. Let me see your papers.
To get IBM to help them with that, right? It'll be easier if we just put these little tattoos on your arm. We'll know exactly who you are.
They do actually. When I lived in Germany, I used to live in Berlin, and there was a thing called Meldebestätigung, which is your register of address. And when I arrived in Berlin, within the first week, you have to register with the police, and you have to produce your papers, passport, the proof of where you're living, and so on. They are quite strict on.
All Germans are registered. If you want to find somebody, you go down to the police station.
Yeah, and the thing about that brings us to kind of what Scott was mentioning there about Soros. That Soros is one of the main oligarchs behind the coercive engineered migration agenda, as he is one of the main oligarchs behind the colour revolutions and a whole host of kind of people power coups all over Africa right now. On the question of kind of control and registration, a lot of the migrants are receiving iPhones financed by A1, the A1 telecom company in Austria, which is controlled by Carlos Slim. And he's reputed to be the richest man in the world, the Mexican billionaire. Carlos Slim is Lebanese. His real name, I think, is Carlos Salim. So he has a kind of connection to the Middle East himself. But
he's the telecommunications guy from Mexico, right?
Yeah, he's been taking over a lot of major companies in Europe, and he has, I believe, a big holding in the Austrian telecommunications company. The main research for this was done by German researchers, particularly Eva Hermann, which is a very famous journalist in Germany. And the migrants are actually getting, a lot of them are getting mobile phones. Now,
well, you know what that's for, don't you?
They're getting Obama phones?
Yeah, no, you know what that's for. You're close with the Obama part. You know, when they got to get rid of them, the drone strike knows just where to go.
Yeah, but the thing is, there are lots of operatives in among the migration flows. And this was confirmed, I think, was confirmed by Assad when he said that the Islamic State would be among them. Again, the Islamic State are US Israeli intelligence assets, and they could be used for all kinds of operations, particularly in the Balkans, which is extremely unstable, and there's a lot of pipeline issues there to do with Russia that the US is attempting to sabotage, and there are lots of ethnic issues that will be used by the US imperialism to destabilize the Balkans as well. So the question of mobile phones is interesting, because if you want to get a mobile phone here, any worker in Europe wants to get a mobile phone, iPhone, you have to register, you have to show a passport, you have to show proof of address, you have to have a bank account. It's actually not that easy to buy a mobile phone these days. You have to have a lot of, you have to produce a lot of paperwork just to get a mobile phone.
Because if you post a comment from your phone that's critical of somebody that's important, they want to know who said it.
Yeah, well, and that's increasingly happening in Germany. Yeah. There's another aspect to this. So just to finish that point, why are they getting mobile phones? They get mobile phones because there's a lot of operatives among these refugees, and because the US is actually paying US agencies, and this was confirmed by Austrian intelligence, US agencies are paying for a lot of the boats to come over. So there's a huge sort of underground traffic smuggling agenda here. A lot of the NGOs related, I think, to Soros. I can't prove that they're getting money from Soros, but I made the point in my article that if they're not getting money from Soros, they should be, because they're certainly doing what Soros wants. And so I've named a lot of those culprits in the article. So there's quite a complex infrastructure of smugglers and NGOs involved in this. A lot of, for example, in Berlin, there's a group called Peng. They're related to, they're part of the Ayn Rand Institute. They're financed by the Ayn Rand Institute, which is run by an Israeli-American. So there's a lot of, and of course, there's also the major racket of making money out of the refugees. Right. ORS Services in Europe is the main logistical company making money out of the refugees. The shareholders of it are all linked to Barclays Bank, which of course is part of the Rothschild family empire. So the money is going right to the top. It's quite disgusting. ORS Services are making an absolute fortune out of this. One of the growth industries in Germany right now, and probably from now on, will be actually, transporting people around like cattle. That's essentially what's happening. Yes.
Well, Scott was talking about that right before
security.
Scott was talking about that right before you came on, transporting them around to the different work camps that the foundations are probably still warm from World War II. Go ahead, Scott.
Flexible workforces are a key aspect of neoliberal economics. We know that. But here's more to the point of what Gaurav was saying. That's very true, and it's a means by which to maintain communication with their assets. But I think it's also a means by which to control the way they communicate, the way they talk, what they think about, what they see. Also remember, if they're smartphones, if these are iPhones, they're going to be limited iPhones. They're not going to have access to various information sites because we know that they're already in the process of doing that as well. But more to the point, yes, it's about making money for these NGOs and these companies that are putting these phones out there and giving them these phones. But you have to ask yourself, again, back to neoliberal economics, where is all this money coming from? How do the NGOs get it before they pass it on down? The money that Soros was talking about 6 months ago, and that we've committed $1 billion, and every nation in Europe is supposed to commit X amount of dollars. This money is coming from central banks. It's being, again, more debt servitude for the people in Europe. The money is just being funneled straight to the NGOs and they're taking their cut straight down to the people who are selling the phones or giving the phones.
Carlos Slim
and George Soros. And in the end, the people of the communities, the people of France, the people of Germany, the people of all across Europe, they're the ones who are on the hook for it.
Yeah. And there's a big problem as well with political correctness, institutionalized political correctness. I mean, the fact that, it is a fact that there's a rape crisis in Europe, and it is a fact that the rape crisis is linked to migration.
There's a what crisis? What did you say?
There's a rape crisis.
Oh, rape crisis. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's very serious. I mean, I've encountered people who have been raped in Italy by migrants from Somalia, from other countries, Morocco. Now, once you mention this, and once you mention a rape crisis, and you make a link with people from countries outside of Europe, you are in risky kind of territory. You're going to be accused of all sorts of things, and you have to be very careful because, first of all, you don't want to, you want to accuse everybody. You don't want to stigmatize people. You don't want to jump to conclusions. The way I look at this is that it exists. It's a big problem in Sweden. It is massive. Now, one of the explanations that has been given for the rape crisis in Sweden, for example, is that women are now reporting rape more. So maybe that's true. So maybe it's not linked to migration. Maybe they are reporting.
Well, of course, listen, we're heading into break. I'll just add this before, though. But don't worry, the women could always defend themselves with their guns. Oh, wait a minute. They're not allowed to have guns in Europe, right?
It's true.
Just like they want to do over here. All right, friends, we're speaking with Geroda Coleman and our good friend Scott Creighton as well, who's probably related to Geroda a long way back. But we'll probably discern that in a pub crawl somewhere one of these days. And Scott's in Tampa, Florida. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and Geroda's in Paris, France. So it's a real international...
This is the Logos Radio Network.
Good friends, what a great show. Of course, every time both of these gentlemen are with us, it's interesting, but now it's sort of mega interesting. And we did not expect our good friend Geroda Coleman in Paris to be online. He happens to be. He has not been on the show in a while, so here he is. He's been knocking some great ones out of the park. And, of course, Scott Creighton, who we have on a regular basis, willieloman.wordpress.com. And the two of them together, and maybe, who knows, they may even be related and like that. So, Scott, I think you were finishing up your point. Maybe you got it done. I have a question for the two of you if you if you're done with that point, then.
We were all over the place talking during the break, and I don't know what point I was making.
Well, there you go. So neither do I. So let me ask both of you, the guys, this. And I know my audience, I know my wonderful audience, and I know this is on their minds. So I'll put it to you like this. Now, this sudden phony baloney crisis, refugee crisis, and I say that because ultimately it's totally phony because without the destabilizing wars in the Middle East, it wouldn't be happening, and there's no good reason for that, okay? And then the destabilizing wars in the Middle East have been happening for a long time, but all of a sudden now the Turks are doing an Olé and pushing everybody out the door, El Norte, right? So why has that happened suddenly right now? So my question is, I can think of at least 4 objectives by the powers that be, the globalists, if you will. And the first one would be, and I'd like you all to hear this and tell me what you think. The first one would be as a bludgeon to make the Europeans who are going to recoil from this react in a way that says, oh, this is terrible. We should stop this flow of refugees. The best way to do that is get rid of Assad really quickly. Let's all get in there, boots on the ground, get rid of the guy, and then that'll stem the flow. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, and I think Geroda was sort of touching on this, maybe Scott as well, this is excellent cover. A big, massive group is excellent cover to start to send a whole bunch of sort of Gladio 2 or Gladio 3 people, even if you want to consider that they're not even Europeans, into Europe, setting them loose, operatives, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whatever you want to call it, all right, getting them mixed in with the unfortunates who've been dispossessed by this whole thing. Another one is, just neoliberal economics, reviving the system that the Germans had during World War II, where you have slave labor, concentration camps, although it looks a little better because they have iPhones and so forth. And then that's number 3. Number 4, the overall, which is also in the forefront of my mind, is just the general continuance of the policy, Frankfurt School, if you will, to just break down society everywhere, weaken cultural strength, mix people together, pit people against each other, like they did out in the empire. Now they're doing it back home by introducing alien populations to each other and just tear things down even more. Bring in, wreck organized labor, what's left of it, wreck pricing structures for labor, what's left of it, and so forth. And who cares what you end up with, because the uber wealthy they own an island somewhere that they can go live on, and they don't need society. What do you think of those 4 points? Point number one being just to anger the Europeans into really just getting involved with getting rid of Assad. Point number two being it's cover to send in operatives. Point number three, it's neoliberal economics for labor. And point number four, it's just eugenics squared to destroy populations and cultures.
I think they're all fine points. I mean, again, they don't let a crisis go to waste. We know that, and everything is multi-tiered. To your first point, I think that was part of the first idea, certainly with ISIS. But then, when they couldn't get behind ISIS, when they tried to stage that chemical weapons attack, and they tried to say it was Assad back in 2013,
which Fox News still says it was.
Which Fox News, and so does the New York Times, by the way. There's a lot of them. The idea is, he said, here's the red line. If they happen to cross this red line, then the very next day they cross the red line. You're right. So I think that was part of the first, the first thing was, going to blame all of this on Syria. We're going to say, remember at first they were trying to say they were all from Syria. Then they found a couple of fake Syrian passports, and people, I think it was even in Germany, maybe, I could be wrong, but the guy was saying, I think it was in the UK, saying, these are fake Syrian passports, they're not real. So that kind of had to let that go. And of course, everyone starts to realize these were mainly economic refugees, as opposed to all coming from Syria or all coming from Libya, or we started realizing they were coming from all, like the other guest said, they're coming from all over Africa, neoliberalized Africa. A lot of them coming from Somalia. So I think that was the first idea. I agree with you there. The cover theory, as far as getting them in as a second Gladio, as a second wave of Gladio in various countries. Again, the other guest, Garad, hinted at that earlier, saying and some of these I think Eastern European countries, where they're not getting the footing that they want with their neoliberal economic plans, and they're not getting a foothold into their governments. I think, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to be able to send people in. They're also going to be able to use this as cover for things like, let's go back to 9/11. One of the big problems with the whole story is that they had, these 19 hijackers, and they got to go bomb Iraq. But they all came from Saudi Arabia, or at least 15 of them came from Saudi Arabia. And in fact, all 15 came from the same, where was it? It wasn't Jakarta. Where was this? One of these cities in Saudi Arabia. They all came from the same office. Jeddah, thank you. So they have to come up with a believable, plausible narrative that explains how these quote-unquote terrorists end up getting into the country. And that's one way to do it. That's the second point you made. We talked about flexible workforces as being a key part of neoliberal economics. That was your third point that you made, and it's absolutely right. You're able to attack the wage structure. And in many ways, I think if this thing in Greece is, if they're going to build this thing in Greece, this basically a concentration camp in Greece, you're going to see these things pop up all over the place. Again, there's money to be made in those as well, because you got to build them. Will Halliburton be getting the contract to build the new concentration camps? I don't know.
And Israel will get the contract for the body scanners to go in and out. That's for sure.
And then which companies will be able to put their new facilities right next to them?
IG Farben.
Right. And the last thing you talked about, and I think that's a big one, you see the same thing happening over and over again in these countries that we neoliberalize, we bring democracy to. And after saying this, I'll turn it over to the other guest, but it's a huge one, and that is cultural warfare. Because even here in the United States, what are all the people saying? We need to stand up for the Constitution. We need to remember the Constitution. This is what our country was founded on. This is what we believe in, and I'll fight and I'll die for this. That's our culture. And there is nothing more powerful, really nothing more powerful, to motivate a people to get up and say, why do we praise all of our soldiers? Because they're going over there to fight for our freedom and fight for American values. That is our culture. And if you destroy the culture, you destroy the will to fight. So I think you're pretty accurate on all four counts.
Breaking it down. Go ahead.
I think it's this. I agree. I mean, I would say it's not just one of them; it's all four, really. They're all interlinked, of course. This is the beginning of a civil war. I mean, it's terrible to say that, knowing what a civil war is. When you look at Syria, I mean, I've been saying this now for almost 5 years, that this civil war in Syria is going to spread. It's not. This is our war. It has nothing. This is our war. We're there. Our governments are there. Our government started it, and it's going to come back. And it's the same methods that are being used to commit genocide and crimes against humanity against the Syrian people will be used here. And in fact, so this element of this strategy of tension, you mentioned Gladio, of course, the famous.
That's right. The Italian version of the NATO Stay Behind armies.
Yeah, the P2 Lodge in Italy, which consisted of journalists, military personnel, politicians, all of the top brass of society, all complicit in conspiring to commit acts of terrorism against Italian citizens. They killed many Italians and Europeans all over Europe in a strategy of tension to justify militarization against the Soviet Union and to crack down on dissent. The cracking down on dissent is one of the most worrying aspects of this, because the French constitution is currently being suspended. It's been changed. As I said at the start, when the terrorist attacks happened in November, that the emergency state would be permanent. We now have a permanent state of emergency and permanent militarization. A lot of these youths coming in are quite aggressive. I'm not saying.
Well, that's a good spot to stop it. Sorry, Garrett, I'm not talking over you, but we got to.
Hold the cages and dump the crates. Burger King is improving the conditions of the animals it uses for meat. It's a victory for the animals and for BK customers. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back with more on this whopper of an announcement next.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
People who care about animal welfare are crowing over Burger King's promise to phase out breeding cages and crates for its chickens and pigs by 2017. It's the most sweeping pledge yet in the multi-billion-dollar fast food industry. For years, animal rights groups have called for changes in the way livestock are treated, like confining animals in tiny pens with concrete floors covered in manure. With mad cow disease, plus undercover investigations into these inhumane conditions, the public wants a change. Isn't it great that consumer pressure can have an impact, even on the king of fast food? I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
I'd actually be kidding about chemtrails.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com.
Good friends, welcome back. This is really great. Serendipity here. Struck tonight because I asked Scott to come on, Scott Creighton from American Everyman. That would be willieloman.wordpress.com. I've been trying to get Garrod back on the show for some time. There's been technical difficulties. He happened to be online tonight, and very, very graciously, Scott has said, sure, let him join us. So we're talking with the three of them, and it's the three of us, and it is very opportunistic because Garrod is right there in Paris and has been talking about not only the immigration crisis, but also the attacks in Paris. And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't it be great to hear from Garrod on that since he was right there at ground zero?
Oh, yeah, I covered that from the very beginning, and there's all kinds of information surrounding that false flag, and I'd love to hear his opinion about what happened.
So it's been about a month or so now, right? I don't know, 6 weeks. What's going on there? And number one, number two, Garrod, what about that phony baloney scene where the cop supposedly got shot at point blank range in the head with an AK-47? There was no blood, no nothing, and then the next day, Sky News was there.
It's like Malayla.
Yeah,
that's the January attack, the Charlie Hebdo attack in January of 2015.
I'm sorry. You're right. That was a Charlie Hebdo attack.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem to make any sense. I'm not a ballistics expert, but I would have expected to see blood after being shot at point blank range in a video like that.
It's all becoming a blur. These false flags are now coming fast and furious. But what about the recent one with the theater and all this stuff? How are the French buying this?
Well, I mean, it's very hard to gauge public opinion because public opinion is generally determined by private companies who are bought by politicians. And so when you see, polls and things in the media, it don't really mean that much. Then, in terms of public opinion is shaped also, of course, by the media, by the mainstream media, by the commercial media, by the corporate media. And it's all owned by the military industrial complex in France. All the major military companies own it. So it's basically, the property of the financial and military oligarchy in France. So there's nothing, you're not going to get any kind of real information about terrorist attacks. The first thing to say about all terrorist attacks, of course, is that you're not allowed to question what happened. You're not allowed to ask that question. You're told that there was a terrorist attack, and you're also given immediately prepared explanation of what happened and who's responsible. They seem to be able to find out within seconds, minutes, who's responsible for these attacks.
Sometimes before they
never
happen,
do any judicial investigation. They never actually do a proper forensic investigation. We know straight away who's responsible. And,
the inspectors involved mysteriously get suicided.
Yeah, that was the case of the Charlie Hebdo attack. The Frederick Heldrew, I think, if I'm not mistaken. His mother does not believe what the police told her about her son. That story makes no sense because he was supposed to have been shot, but he was in a room next to other police officers. And if he had been shot, of course, they would have heard him being shot. So he's most likely strangled. So it was, of course, he was very close to some of the key political figures who were involved with some of the people who were shot in the Charlie Hebdo attacks. And what I mean by that is that he was closely involved. Sorry, not closely related, but he was closely involved in investigating those people. And he was about to release a report about those people. And
the report of his career, right?
Yeah.
Are you talking about he was investigating people working at Charlie Hebdo?
Madame Bougrab, who was one of the women who was having an affair with one of the journalists who was killed. She has been very suspect. She's been behaving very, very suspiciously. And he was about to release a report about her relationship to one of the Charlie Hebdo journalists, and he was killed. So there's lots and lots of questions. We could talk about the ins and outs of the November attacks as well, of course. RT produced a video of the forensic experts, and one of the experts actually turned up on the crime scene. Well, there was two of them, actually. One was chewing gum, and the other was smoking a cigarette. And they had the white coats on and the whole lot, which is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just...
Well, they were having an emergency preparedness drill that day as well, right, with the ambulances,
right? Of course, there was a drill taking place, as there was during the attacks in London in
7/7, 9/11. We had the same thing where they were rehearsing attacks with airplanes.
And who was that? There was a journalist that was at both events too. What was his name? I forget his name, but he was at both events, and he was also... Isn't he supposedly closely related to Hollande or a friend of Hollande?
Oh, that I don't know. I haven't seen that, actually. I have no idea.
We'll have to get you that information. I know what Scott's talking about. There's some guy who acted like a spokesperson at one point, and he was integral to both the attacks.
He even wrote a book about Hebdo.
Yeah.
Oh, it's quite possible. I mean, to be honest, I haven't actually looked into the specific details of what happened. I mean, for me, it's like I kind of concentrate more on what they're doing abroad. It's obvious that they created the Islamic State. It's obvious that these are military intelligence assets, and it's obvious that they're going to be used against the public. I think that's the most important thing for people to understand. And afterwards, the ins and outs of the terrorist attacks are difficult to determine because you have sometimes, claims of crisis actors. I mean, I've seen a lot of that. I saw a lot of that in January. For example, I saw a video of the wife
the British woman was...
Yeah, I saw a video of the wife of our girlfriend, I'm not sure the spouse, of the police officer who was killed. That's the guy who was killed without the blood. And she was smiling at the press conference. I mean, she was smiling. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's possible to be smiling if you're grieving and stuff, but...
You see that over and over again with these family members. And there's a word for that. There's a term for that. What is it called? Liars, not liars, but there's a term for it where
overcompensating. I think
Well, no, I think it's like when they're trying to act and they're trying to act all upset and a smile breaks up because they have an emotion that they're doing this in front of a television. They're lying about this particular thing. They're supposed to feel this way. I studied acting when I was in college and went to school. I worked for a while after that. It's just an emotion you have to, and it's a sudden welling of humor. You see the humor in the whole thing, and that's kind of a defense mechanism. So, but there's a term for that, and you'll see a lot of these people, these crisis actors, talking about family members. This little kid recently here was talking about her mother who just died in this shooting recently over here, and she starts smiling, almost giggling.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those videos on the internet. I mean, there seems to be a lot of bizarre and strange and inexplicable aspects to these attacks. That things that defy belief almost. And so, I to be honest, to be perfectly honest, I just don't know what happened in November. That's my bottom line. I don't know what happened.
I don't know either, but I got
two. Not what they said happened. That's for sure. It's the same with the Charlie Hebdo attack. I know that's what they said happened. Did not happen.
Gilroy, you're there in Paris. Let me ask you the following, all right? Two questions. Now, Thierry Masson with his VoltaireNet site, right?
Yeah. I was on a program with Thierry recently here in France for 3 hours.
And he was one of the first people to really, criticize what happened at the Pentagon here, what happened to the Boeing. He's in Syria, I believe. Did you see his article?
Assassinate him. Sarkozy. I mean, he told me this himself. Sarkozy tried to assassinate him, and he got political exile in Syria in 2007. Right. He hasn't been back here since then.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's real. He wrote a fascinating piece, I thought, where, he intimated in this piece, or he raised the question anyway, something that I believe also happened during Gladio. And these are similar types of operations in the sense that they're secret, off-the-books terror armies that are that are at arm's length, that can be used in a way that it looks like they're not working for the government, when in fact, at the end of the day, they are. But even with Gladio, since they're secret off the books, they then become able to blackmail their handlers, and they can lose control sometimes. And Thierry suggests that perhaps that these ISIS people are starting to throw their weight around, make demands, and that's why they have these terror drills right before, because they know these things are going to come, and they want to get prepared for them and stuff. And they can't totally, I mean, what are you going to do? Bust them? Then if they've got proof that they were working for these governments all along, what happens?
Rates of mental functioning.
Good friends, welcome back. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. A little bit of serendipity here, and thanks to our gracious guest, Scott Creighton, who did not mind having us joined by Gerold O'Coleman. It's been a long time since Gerold's been on the show, but he's really come a long way since his last appearance. He's a regular now on places like Russia Today, and writing some great stuff from Paris, the city of light, where there's been a lot of light lately. Gentlemen, this is our last segment. How would you like to wrap this wonderful conversation up tonight?
Oh my God, I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, we have to
talk. I could talk for hours, Tom. Once you get me talking about these things,
a couple of Irishmen or three of them.
We have to make concrete plans on this bar crawl. That's what we got to do.
There you go. I haven't been to Paris in a while.
We were just talking. I suppose you mentioned the four main points: concentration camps, destruction of labor, organized labor, justification for foreign wars, justification for police state. All of these things, of course, are related. And
the destruction of cultures, too, right? They're really tearing Europe apart.
It's a very important point because one's sense of oneself. In Ireland, we experienced colonialism for a long time, and it lost our language. And it was one of the great cultural catastrophes of the 19th century was the destruction of the Irish language. An entire culture, a literary culture, was destroyed, and we never got over it as a country, as a nation. We still haven't got over that. It's an open wound, really, and that is what colonialism does. I see this engineered migration crisis as a neo-colonial strategy, a neo-colonial agenda that will where people are being used as weapons. It's very important for people to understand both the migrants coming in were predominantly young men. And the indigenous cultures of Europe, which are, let's face it, they're not really indigenous. I mean, we're a multicultural society here in France and in Ireland and everywhere else. But everybody who's a resident and who feels in some way kind of settled here, it's from the settled culture and the migrants that we need to understand that everybody is a victim of the financial oligarchy of the global ruling class. And we need to have more of a class understanding of this. I think if the migrants and the indigenous populations, and again, I mean the heterogeneous indigenous populations, that is Algerian French, Moroccan French, whatever, once they realize, who's behind this, then we can make progress. What I see happening in Europe is that there are a lot of Algerians. I know a lot of Algerians here. They agree with me. I have a lot of African friends. They agree with me as well on this. A lot of my work has been published in Africa, in Zimbabwe, and in Eritrea. So racism is being instrumentalized by extremely malevolent people to bully others and to create conditions of social tension. And there are a lot of these operatives, I hate to say, even in the alternative media. And I think they're operatives who have an agenda, and it is extremely sinister. I've been attacked I have seen other people given death threats, and this is getting quite serious and nasty. I have never advocated cultural homogeneity or any kind of racial agenda. It's on my writings are in the public domain. But this campaign is kind of gathering pace, as it were, in social media, and it's gotten quite nasty. A lot of my colleagues as well, people who work for it, have been attacked. So there are, I think we need to be kind of just very cold and analytical in the way we understand and analyze this, and we need to look at things that we probably don't want to look at. But we also need just to keep our eye on the fact that this is an imperial agenda, and imperialism is here the enemy. It's not the migrant, even if a lot of these migrants are quite aggressive, and I've seen that myself. There's a lot of aggression. It's not making this easy for the local population. A lot of people are ignoring, for example, the local population in Calais, who are desperate. There are women crying. I've seen women crying. They're afraid to let their children outside because they're migrants in their garden. There are whole areas in Greece that have been occupied. These are poor working class.
Where's the accountability? Where is the accountability
for these poor people? And now they don't know what is happening. I mean, if you start using people as weapons against other people, that can get extremely nasty, and it will lead to all sorts of reaction. In Calais, there have already been gunfire from locals against the migrants among themselves. Of course, this is the potential for destabilization in Europe is enormous. Not just in France, but in every other country, Germany in particular, of course, and in the Balkans. So, look, the United States is out of control. They are pursuing a policy of tension.
Well, wait a minute. Is it the United States? Hold on. It's not just the United States. It's not the United States. We don't see any of these migrants going right next door to Israel, do we?
Oh, well, I'm glad you said that because.
Let me just toss this in there. Yeah, what we're talking about, you called it imperialism, and good for you. You're absolutely right. That is the code of conduct. That is the means. But that is not the war. You talked earlier about what's happening in Syria. It's not a civil war. No, it is not. It is something that we did. It's something that we created. And when I say we, I mean the United States, but I also mean Great Britain. I also mean Israel. I also mean France. What did France do in Libya? That wasn't a great thing, was it? So let's not just say it's all the United States. What we're talking about here, you talked about the oligarchs, the global oligarchs doing this. This is globalized global class warfare. Now, I know people don't want to hear that word, that phrase, class warfare, but that is exactly what we are talking about. You say turning people against people, using people as weapons. We're not using just people as weapons. They've been using people as weapons for generations after generation to generation. Talk about Vietnam, talk about World War II, talk about World War I. What we're talking about now is using poor, displaced people that they created, either with their destabilization campaigns or their economic warfare. They created poor, displaced people, and they are setting poor, displaced people en masse against other poor, displaced people in efforts that we talked about before, those 4 points that you talked about, in order to destabilize and to destroy the cultures. That is the root of all evil. But that's what we're talking about. This is globalized, global class warfare.
I agree entirely, and it's very important as well, just to make the point that Tom made there. The Israelis, I mean, I make this, the reason why when I talk about the United States, I mean, the United States, Israel, there's no real difference. I think the best term the point I make in my article is that the current form of imperialism is Zionism. The Israeli state is a state that was built on the creation of refugees and population transfer. And so they are very much the driving force.
Also known as ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing, exactly. And they are the ones who are behind the war against Syria. They want to balkanize Syria. This is part of the Yinon Plan, which was a plan elaborated by an Israeli state official in 1982, which states very clearly that Israel's geopolitical interest is to divide all Arab states in its vicinity, and they've been doing that very effectively everywhere. Now, the Israeli state is a racial state. You need to do a DNA test to ascertain if you're racially Jewish to become a citizen of Israel. They sterilize black people in Israel. It is a terroristic, racist state, and openly racist. Now, a lot of Israeli agencies are funneling refugees into Europe. They want population transfer because they want to get a lot of young, fit, able Arab men out of the Middle East and use them as weapons against the peoples of Europe. So,
well, let's face it, they're not threatening
great Israel agenda, which is being carried out. So that also, I should say that Israel is, culturally homogenous. They want cultural homogeneity in Israel, and they want to use people basically against each other in Europe. So there is that multicultural agenda get everybody fighting, create enclaves and so on. It's a kind of a Gazification of the world. I see this as a Gazification, if you can coin such a word. Basically, the whole world becomes a military camp. The whole world becomes Gaza. And that's a nightmare scenario. It's just something that we need to try and expose as much as we can. If we don't do it, there isn't really much hope.
It's also the great war of civilization that they keep talking about is coming. And it turns out to be, in Europe, it turns out to be Christian civilization against Islamic civilization with Israeli, Jewish civilization in Israel behind the wall that Trump says he wants to build.
Europe, the only way to keep Europe within the Israeli Anglo-American alliance is to destabilize it to the point where the Europeans will do anything they'll intervene anywhere. So it's kind of also to keep the war on terror going. If we have, as soon as there's a bomb going off, everybody's for bombing whatever. There's public support for it because most people have no idea what's going on. And so you have that element to it as well. To keep the war on terror going, you need to have, sufficient amount of fear in society. So, just imagine if something catastrophic happened. One of the chief ideologues of the French regime, and we should be calling it regime, we're talking about regimes here. The French regime has had a major policy advisor for years. His name is Jacques.
We got about 20 seconds. Go ahead.
Jacques Attali has predicted this year that there will be catastrophes, that there will be major terrorist attacks and so on. He knows what he's talking about because he comes from the inside. So, it also shows that the elite are telling us there will be more attacks in spite of the fact that they're putting barricades everywhere to protect us. They're saying, no, there's nothing we can do about it. They're still going to attack us even more and more and more. So
bigger, better, Gladio. Gentlemen, that's all the time. I'm sorry, we're going to run out of time. Garoto Coleman and Scott Creighton, WillieLoman.wordpress.com. They'll both be back very soon. Thank you. Thank you. Is that, that's about all the